Oligarchs of Russia have a history that is marked by enormous wealth, political dominance, and occasionally a spectacular collapse from one's position. The upheaval that followed the fall of the Soviet Union. Several of these billionaires gained enormous riches, and many went on to become major actors in the process of establishing modern Russia. The ascent and the fall of these individuals, which is intricately connected to the political path of Vladimir Putin, provides a glimpse into how power and riches are administered inside his government. Beginning with their rise to the prominence in the 1990s and continuing through the difficulties they're currently confronted with, the story of Russia's oligarchs is one of survival, ambition, and intrigue. Origins of oligarchs. As a result of the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia experienced a period of economic upheaval. The essentially planned economy that had dominated the Soviet Union for decades was abruptly dissolved, and Russia was forced to make the transition to a market economy without any prior preparation. This resulted in a significant flood of privatization in the 1990s, during which state-owned businesses were sold off to private investors. Several key industries, including oil, gas, and steel, were put up for auction at prices that were significantly lower than their true value. This made it possible for a select group of business people to get their hands on these assets. In a short period, these business people, who came to be known as oligarchs, accumulated enormous riches. Boris Berezovsky, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Roman Abramovich, and Vladimir Putin were among the individuals who rose to prominence during this period. Through the utilization of their newly acquired economic power, they were able to acquire political influence, frequently establishing close relations with the government of President Boris Yeltsin. The oligarchs were able to exert influence, makes them their sphere of influence well beyond the confines of their sectors. At this time, it appeared as though the oligarchs controlled a significant portion of Russia, thereby establishing what many people saw to be a system of crony capitalism. Their wealth skyrocketed, and they were able to exert influence not only over the Russian economy but also over markets throughout the world by exporting natural resources such as oil, gas, and other minerals. Vladimir Putin's ascension, a shift in power. When Vladimir Putin took power in the year 2000, it marked the beginning of a significant change in the relationship that the oligarchs had with the state. Putin intended to reduce the influence of the oligarchs and restore the control of the Kremlin over Russia's economy. Either the oligarchs would align themselves with the state, or they would face the repercussions. That was the message that Putin meant to convey. To collapse in Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the former chief executive officer of Yokos, which is one of the major oil firms in Russia, is one of the most dramatic examples of this shift being witnessed. Khodorkovsky, who was formerly one of the wealthiest men in Russia, had publicly voiced his disapproval of Putin and was providing financial support to opposition organizations. Khodorkovsky was taken into custody in 2003, charged with evading taxes and committing fraud. As a result of the dissolution of his firm Yokos, its assets were handed to state-controlled companies, the most notable of which was Rosneft. The arrest of Khodorkovsky conveyed a very obvious message to other oligarchs. A great number of oligarchs, such as Roman Abramovich and Oleg Deripaska, were aware of this new reality. This allowed them to ensure that they continued to have a tight relationship with the Kremlin. Individuals who did not comply were marginalized or exiled against their will. The relationship between oligarchs and the Russian state, people who were less autonomous, with the Kremlin and more integrated into the apparatus of the state, emerged as a new breed of oligarchs during Putin's tenure as president of Russia. Oligarchs who showed devotion were rewarded with lucrative state contracts. The state maintained a firm grip on the country's most important businesses, particularly the oil and gas industry. Oligarchs became instruments of global influence for Putin, who wielded them himself. Individuals such as Kennedy Timchenko, Arkady Rotenberg, and Igor Sekin, all of whom had personal ties to Putin, were recruited to run major sectors of the economy, particularly in the areas of energy and defense. These new oligarchs were profoundly embedded. While this was going on, a great number of oligarchs continued to broaden their financial horizons across the globe. After owning Chelsea Football Club, the United Kingdom, for example, Roman Abramovich rose to prominence as a key person in the Western region. Despite this, it was anticipated that these billionaires would take advantage of the worldwide influence to advance Russia's geopolitical objectives as Putin's rule became more secure. A turning point was reached in 2014 when the Ukraine crisis occurred. Russia's oligarchs experienced a turning point in their lives when the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the ensuing sanctions imposed by the West occurred. The majority of them discovered that their companies have been targeted, with their assets being frozen and their access to international markets being curtailed. They were forced to rethink their strategy as a result of the sanctions, which had a substantial impact on their ability to operate on a worldwide scale. The instability of their overseas activities was brought to the attention of the oligarchs, such as Oleg Deripaska, whose aluminum empire was particularly heart-struck. Over many years, they had endeavored to strike a compromise between their interests in the West and Putin's Russia. This balancing act was no longer possible, as seen by the crisis that occurred in 2014. Many were compelled to return their fortune to their homeland and concentrate on establishing domestic connections with the Kremlin. Additionally, the Kremlin's power over the oligarchs was strengthened as a result of these sanctions. Putin made an offer of state assistance to companies that were negatively harmed by the sanctions. However, in exchange, the oligarchs were required to demonstrate complete devotion to the government. The tightening of the news during the fall of the oligarchs. As long as Putin remained in power, the room for oligarchs to conduct their business independently of the state continued to decrease. The state gradually took control of an increasing portion of the economy, particularly in important areas such as the banking industry, the energy industry, and the defense industry. Oligarchs who attempted to oppose or carve out their own political space were immediately dealt with, either by legal methods or by depriving them of their assets. This was done to suppress their political influence. Within the context of the current political climate, the oligarchs have also been utilized as instruments in Putin's standoff with the Western world. As the sanctions against Russia firms continue to be implemented, many oligarchs have found themselves in a predicament, but they must choose between their allegiance to Putin and their desire to safeguard their riches around the world. Even renowned persons such as Abramovich, who was formerly considered beyond reach due to his tight relationship with Western nations, have subjected to a greater level of scrutiny. For many people, the time has passed when billionaires could act independently of the Kremlin and have the freedom to act as they like. The political goals of Vladimir Putin are more closely aligned with the interests of Russia's billionaires than they have ever been before. In conclusion, the future of the oligarchs in Putin's Russia is undetermined. The rise to power of Vladimir Putin is inextricably linked to the history of Russia's families of wealth. From their first descent during the turbulent 1990s to their current role as tools of state power, the fortunes of the oligarchs have fluctuated with the tides of Russian politics. Because Putin is continuing to exert his authority over the nation, the oligarchs are no longer the free agents they were in the past. Rather, they are now essential components of the state apparatus. For many of them, their continued existence is contingent on their allegiance to Putin. As long as they continue to be of use to the Kremlin, they will continue to take pleasure in their wealth and maintain their status. Over the years to come, the destinies of Russia's oligarchs will continue to be intertwined with those of Putin's dictatorship. The role that the oligarchs will play in Russia's future is still unclear. But one thing is certain, their tale is not yet done. This is because the sanctions imposed by the West are becoming more severe and political. Pressures are increasing. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and drop a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.